Hi, Guy. Tonight we will walk into a Viking's longhouse. On a cold night, your breath freezes before you can sigh. Picture. The snow outside is creaking. The cold wind was pressing against the wooden wall. The flickering firelight cast shadows on the smoke-filled rafters. You are lying on the bench wrapped in animal skin. The first idea that comes to your mind is very simple. How on earth do people survive? The second idea is even more acute. You probably won't. So before you feel comfortable, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the video, but only if you really enjoy what I'm doing here. When you are watching, write down your location and local time in the comments. It's always interesting to see what people all over the world are listening to. Now, dim the lights. For this story will take you deep into the hearts of the Viking knights. The longhouse itself is your shield against the cold of the Arctic, but that's all. The hall was built of thick wooden sealed with turf and soil, large enough to accommodate a family and their animals, but well-minus ventilated enough for the cold to seep in through every crack. You lie on the rough wooden board, feeling the cold air crawling over your face, which reminds you that heat insulation is a modern luxury. Historical records describe longhouses as smoky, dark and always damp, but they can also withstand the long winters of the Scandinavian peninsula. The first thing you notice is its smell. Thick forests, smoke filled the rafters, mingled with the wet soil from the thatched roof and the musky scent of distant caged animals. This is a fragrance that adheres to the skin, hair and bedding. Whether you like it or not, it's something you always carry with you. Archaeologists have discovered carbon deposits from centuries of smoke that have blackened wood, which proves that the fire has been burning all along. You can almost hear the hissing and crackling sounds of wood hitting the scorching embers, pushing the silence of the night. This is the mainstream fact. The longhouse was the central building of Viking society, extending up to 70 feet, in some cases with a fireplace in the middle. Without it, it would be impossible to survive the winter in Scandinavia. But some strange details have also emerged, such as poor ventilation in some longhouses, and guests often complain about the choking smoke. Imagine that when you try to fall asleep, every breath feels like inhaling a bonfire. Some people even believe that the continuous smoke actually protects the wood on the roof and kills the pests that would rot the wood. So yes, smoke may irritate your lungs, but it unintentionally plays a role in controlling pests. Turn your body to listen. The longhouse was filled with the low growls of animals, corpses turning over on the straw mats. Here, someone coughed, and there, someone prayed in a low voice. This is not the tranquility of a modern bedroom. This is a living barn. The walls were creaking in the wind, and you felt every gust of wind squeezing in through the seams like cold fingers. However, despite numerous difficulties, there is still a kind of warmth in this public intimacy. Scholars are still confused about just how effective these halls are. Some people believe that due to the insulation of the turf and the closely laid wooden boards, they offer reasonable shelter. Others insist that sleeping indoors is no warmer than sleeping outdoors. It's just that there is less wind. Which side is right? This is still a debate. But it is obvious that the Vikings accepted discomfort as part of their survival. For them, shivering under the fire is not a failure. This is daily life. Now close your eyes and imagine this scene. Outside, the northern lights are rippling in the northern sky. But in the hall, your world is filled only with shadows, firelight, and the deep sound of a body bitten by the severe winter. The flame was glowing in the center, painting everything in the shadow of amber and smoke. Your fingers are stiff from the cold, but you cling to the comfort of your fur and family. This is survival, not luxury. As you gradually fall asleep, you wonder what other methods these people have used to keep warm. The halls around you can't bear their own weight. A huge pile of wooden turf was buried in the soil. You are tracing the wall with your eyes, noticing how thick they were, almost suffocating. It seemed as if the Vikings were well aware that thin planks could never withstand the bone-chilling cold. These walls are layered, composed of a jigsaw puzzle of logs, clay and turf, deliberately stacked together to withstand the cold. If you imagine walking into the snowstorm outside, with the blizzard pounding against the longhouse, the contrast inside is dramatic. It may not be warm, but it can survive. This is often the difference between life and death. Archaeological excavations across the Scandinavian peninsula have all revealed the same pattern. A longhouse built with a turf roof, wrapped in soil around a wooden frame. This is no accident. Judging from the physical evidence, still buried underground, this point is certain. The roof slopes very low, helping the snow pile up like an insulating blanket, while the walls lean inward, as if the entire house is bending over to face the wind. You can almost feel the weight of the snow above your head. However, as the snow sealed the gaps, this structure not only did not collapse but became even warmer. This is a clever adaptation. You built a roof, the sky has been insulated for free. However, the experience of living there was not romantic. The room was dim and narrow, filled with the smoke and dust from countless fires. However, it is precisely its design, the grass, the logs, and the low profile of the house in the landscape that enables families to spend Arctic nights. Most modern tourists may complain, tremble and cough within an hour, but the Vikings call it consolation, and there is a strange twist here. Records show that similar thatched house designs have been preserved in Iceland and the Faroe Islands until modern times. In fact, until the 19th century, farmhouses in Iceland were still using thick layers of turf. Imagine that such an effective method persisted for nearly 1,000 years after the end of the Viking Age. This is not nostalgia. This is purely practical. Now pull the cloak tight and pay attention to the texture on the inner wall. They are not smooth. Few places covered with grass and soil. They will expand. In the areas blackened by smoke, they will peel off. The smell persisted, almost a sour taste produced by the trapped moisture. For this is life. The city wall is not merely enclosed. They breathed, absorbed the damp air and slowly released smoke from the roof. Is it really warmer than a simple wooden house? Some experts answer is affirmative. Turf plays a modern role in heat insulation. Others, however, believe that this benefit is negligible and that true warmth only comes from the fire itself. You are lying in bed, still wondering which side is right. The soundscape adds another layer of realism. You can hear the groans of the stone ice pressed beams, occasional the dripping of water from the melting ice on the roof, and the dull sound of the wind rustling through the long panels. In the absence of windows, every sense becomes more acute. You rely on your ears, nose and skin to tell you what is happening in the dark. The city wall is not static. They seem still alive, squeaking, breathing, undodging, almost unable to withstand the northern night. It is worth remembering that these buildings are not permanent structures in the modern sense. Longhouses can last for 1 or 2 generations before wood rots or turf deteriorates. If well maintained, they may last even longer. However, during this period, it gave a family and their animals the chance to get through the winter, which would otherwise have been impossible. Nowadays, most experts believe that these 20-meter longhouses themselves are part of the heating strategy. The more people and livestock there are inside, the more heat is generated. The house can not only keep out the cold, but also keep warm. This is one of the details that makes you hesitate. Some excavation sites show that people have dug out longhouses underground. This technology uses the soil itself as an insulating material. Lie on your back and imagine that the wall is not rising from the soil but sinking into it. The cold wind sweeps across the roof line, while the ground protects you in a damp silence. This is not glamorous, but it's very efficient. This small design trick might have saved countless lives. But historians do not agree on how much comfort these houses provided. Many of them believe that the longhouse is always shrouded in smoke, cold and almost uninhabitable. Survival depends more on fur clothes than on the building. Others, however, counter that they had a well-designed airflow system, which indicates that the Vikings knew more about ventilation than we might think. Without a written manual, the truth drifts between these positions. You can only lie under the grassy roof, breathing in the mixture of warmth and smoke, not knowing which explanation best fits the reality. Now, as you immerse yourself in the imagination of this long night, you once again notice the public side. The house has never been empty. The thickness of the wall makes it feel like a fortress, but the people inside have turned it into a home. The whispers of children, the snorting of animals, and the rhythmic breathing of neighbors. All these sounds bounce back on the grass and wood, weaving into a lullaby for survival. In a world where a snowstorm can destroy an entire village, this longhouse stands like a wound protecting people. One thing is clear, the longhouses of the Vikings were not a luxurious place but a compromise with nature. Its design is simple, but mine is structured and with a clear purpose. It can absorb snow, heat, block the wind and provide shelter for humans and animals. You might sneer at the idea of sharing a smoke-filled room with Keflan sheep, but for the Vikings, it meant extra warmth. When you lie there, your mind will drift to how much effort it takes to build such a structure. Chop down trees with iron axes, drag grass, and spread mud in cold weather. The very existence of this longhouse itself indicates patience and stubbornness. These qualities define people themselves. You want to know if they have felt warm during the construction process, because they know that every log and every piece of turf will help them get through the new year. The storm outside is still roaring, but here, the thick walls have dampened its ferocity. The longhouse let out a sigh, the flames crackled, and your breath mingled with the smoke and steam from the damp ground. It doesn't feel well. It's not the kind of comfort you know. However, for the Vikings, this was on the verge of life and death. When you close your eyes again, you realize the brilliance of their compromise. It's not about conquering the cold, but getting through it. The radiance of the central flame turned into your entire horizon. This is not merely warmth. It is life itself, the axis around which this longhouse rotates. Every Viking night whirled out from that flame. Without it, the whole would fall into a cold silence. You stretched and felt the heat flowing through your skin like a tide. Getting too close will make you sweat. If it's too far away, your toes will become stiff in the frost. Fire is fickle, generous and at the same time dangerous. What archaeologists keep discovering at the excavation site is that there are long-burned turf troughs in the middle of these holes. These are the remnants of open fireplaces, sometimes extending to the length of the room and sometimes divided into several sections. This is conclusive evidence. It is no exaggeration to say that the center of the Vikings' life was fire. It brings heat, light and a place to cook. If there were no flames, the people in the room would not sleep, eat, or even survive. However, there is a strange detail here. Some legends mention that at night people carefully piled ashes on the fire, so that the fire would simmer until the next morning. This technology keeps the embers alive without having to burn precious fuel. You would imagine a Viking kneeling carefully, scooping up the grey powder from the burning coal, sealing away the warmth like a treasure under a blanket of ashes. This is an old version of pressing the snooze button, making sure the house wakes up in the faint light and is ready to be coaxed back into the flames. But living in fire means living in danger. The sparks leaping from the logs can easily stick to straw bedding or woolen cloaks. As long as there is a little embers, the longhouse will turn into a stone. The smell of burnt fur or clothes may not be uncommon. In fact, some experts point out that these fireplaces increases the danger. The greater the fire, the greater the possibility of a disaster. Every night, people still lie around it, for otherwise they would freeze to death. When you move on the imagined bedding, you will notice how uneven the heat is. One side of your body is bathed in warmth, while the other side is very cold, exposed to the wriggling airflow beneath the door. The pushing and pulling of this kind of firelight was exactly what Viking families endured. If you get too close to the flame, you will be choked by the smoke and there is a risk of getting burned. When you go too far, you draw your body even tighter, clinging to others just to keep the edge warm. Contemporary scholars hold different opinions on how these fires are managed. Some people think that there are raised stone boundaries to control the fire. Others, however, believe that the evidence of flat fireplaces indicates that there are no obstacles, only flickering flames at night. This is an unresolved issue, and the lack of miners preserved stone artifacts in many excavations makes the truth elusive. You can imagine it as a neat luminous channel, or a pile of embers, scattering sparks in the dark. Tune your ears to the sound by the fireplace. The wood made a sharp crackling sound and a softer hissing sound as the sap burst at high temperatures. The fire was spurting, and occasionally a piece of wood made a low sound. These sounds mingled with the steady breathing rhythm of the person lying beside them, passing through the longhouse. Fire not only warms the body, but also calms the mind. In a world where the night is infinitely long, That hypnotic sound must be its own lullaby. One thing that is widely accepted is that fire is the only true lights or sin side. Bull lamps or torches may be used occasionally, but they are secondary. Imagine that in a crowded hall, you are trying to navigate through a beam of glowing flames. The shadows flickered faintly against the backdrop of the grass wall. The children woke up and mistook it for a ghost. In the firelight, supernatural and ordinary things blurred, and stories grew from these shapes. It is easy to see how the legendary tales of ghosts, gods and heroes blossom in this half-lightened, half-dark world. Here is a side note worth savoring carefully. Some Viking longhouses had multiple fireplaces instead of just one. In Greenland, several fire pits were unearthed in a hall, which might have served different families or functions. This means a public yet divided space, as if there were multiple small worlds under the same roof. You imagine the hot zones overlapping each other, with each household crowded around their own fire, each fire being a private island in the smoky ocean of the whole. Of course, the downside is the smoke itself. In the early designs, there were no chimneys. Smoke rose from under the rafters, and then seeped out from the roof. The upper air of the hall was filled with soot, and the rafters turned black after several winters. Tourists often describe the indoor environment of the Vikings as suffocating and dim. Some scholars even speculate that people sleep very low above the ground, partly to avoid the thickest smoke above. This is a satirical survival strategy. The fireplace gives life, but you must climb out of its breath to get through the night. Think about the sensory overload this causes. The heat wave is scorching and the smoke is stinging your eyes. But the other option is even worse. You lay in bed, tears streaming down your face, coughing, but still holding on to warmth. Is it worth it? Every Viking would say yes. Some experts have also put forward an interesting possibility that fire itself is not only practical but also sacred. The fireplace may be regarded as a spiritual center, with family deities or protective deities connected to it, feeding the flames untending to the embers. These behaviors may be either out of respect or out of need. Imagine a mother lying on a log and praying softly, believing that the flames will keep her child alive until dawn. Now imagine that the rhythm of the entire night is shaped by this kind of light. The fire gradually died down. People stir and add wood. The smoke thickens. The people in the hall fell asleep again. This cycle repeated itself until dawn finally pierced through the grey stripes through the cracks in the roof. You never sleep well. This is impossible. On the contrary, you wander between wakefulness and dreams, and your body adjusts to life by the fireplace. Therefore, when you approach the imagined flame, you will realize its paradox. It is both a protector and a threat, both a comfort and a suffocation. Without it, you won't see another morning. But with it, the price you have to pay is smoke, danger and restless nights. However, for the Vikings, this balance was normal, the heartbeat of their world. The longer you stay in the smoke-filled hall, the more you will notice the strange dance of the air. After a while, smoke rose slowly, curling into the rafters like a grey ribbon. In the next second, it will rush down, stinging your throat and making you cry. You cough, pull your cloak tighter, and realize that ventilation is the hidden mystery of the Viking longhouses. Drinking too much will make you freeze. Too little will suffocate you. There is no perfect balance, only the constant negotiation between the cold air and the smoke like warmth. Archaeological remains reveal simple roof vents, and the gaps on the ridge allow smoke to escape. These are not fancy chimneys but narrow crevices, sometimes covered with movable plants or turf, which can be adjusted according to the wind and weather. You can almost imagine a tired Viking pushing the roof into place, muttering to himself to the billowing smoke of unwillingness to cooperate. This concept is very simple but very smart. Create sufficient suction to pull the smoke into the sky while allowing as little heat as possible to escape. However, even with these innovations, the evidence of blackened rafters and wood-choked brusset clearly illustrates this issue. Smoke lingered. It covered the surfaces of objects, seeped into the clothes, and made every longhouse exude the smell of an overburned bonfire. Many researchers believe that this is not merely a minor annoyance, but a chronic health issue. Imagine the air you breathe every night. Burning eyes, inflamed lungs, and sleep disorders. The city wall blocks the wind, but the flames have filled your chest with ashes. Here is an interesting observation. Although there are obvious discomforts, some experts believe that a smoke-filled indoor environment has unexpected benefits. Persistent smog may drive away insects and prevent flies and mosquitoes in warm months. Smoke may also have slowed down the growth of bacteria in food storage areas. So when your body aches due to coughing, your supply can last longer and your livestock will be healthier. This is a strange trade-off. It is not healthy for the lungs, but it is helpful for overall survival. When you imagine it, the feeling of lying in the smog is almost tangible. Your skin stung by the sting in the air, your hair always smells of smoke, and your ears catch every change in the airflow. Ventilation has become a problem. In which direction does the wind blow? Should you open the exhaust hole a little larger? Would you dare to risk losing precious calories? These decisions determine whether the family will cough all night or remain silent. Experts continue to debate just how effective these smoke holes are. Some people think they provide sufficient airflow, especially when there are cracks on the walls. Others, however, insist that they are merely making symbolic gestures and can by no means improve the situation. As no complete roof system has survived, the academic debate has remained unresolved. You can only imagine the scene of war. The heat slipped out and the smoke pressed in. People moved restlessly under the blanket, trapped in balance. There is another disturbing detail. That is, smoke is not harmless. The soot was actually piled layer upon layer, so thick that some of the roof beams that have been preserved today are almost painted black. In some places, archaeologists have scraped off the remnants that have hardened over the centuries, which is a cruel reminder of how many fires once roared beneath. If the walls of those longhouses could speak, they would wither. However, in contrast to this cruel reality lies another strange benefit. The soot applied to the wood might have reinforced them, protecting the wood from insects and decay. What seems like devastating pollution might play a protective role. You can imagine the Viking builders nodding in satisfaction, not because they knew chemistry, but because these beams were more durable than expected. Survival is sometimes accidental. Now listen carefully to the sounds in the smoke-filled hall. You heard the child sobbing softly in her eyes, a goat coughing faintly in the distant corner, and the footsteps of a man standing up and fiddling with the fire. Every movement stirs up the smoke again, and the rhythm of the night is disrupted by these small interruptions. There is no keen and peaceful sleep, only restless rest when the body adapts to the air that always smells of fire. Some legendary tales even hint at this difficulty, suggesting that characters lie in the smoke or curse the black mist adhering to the rafters. Language itself retains uncomfortable memories. However, despite sounding very inconvenient, people still got used to it. Just as modern urban residents have learned to ignore the hum of traffic, the Vikings must have also learned to breathe, cough, turn over and continue to sleep through the smoke. This is the price of warmth. Let's consider its psychological aspect again. In the hazy haze, the shadows distorted on the walls, making the rafters look like giants. With a half-awake mind, stunned by the smoke, it might be very easy to summon the forms of Gertus, ancestors, or wandering spirits. Could it be that the smoke sparked imagination, allowing the story to take shape in the darkness of the firelight? Folklorists are skeptical about this. They have noticed how many Norse myths are immersed in the imagery of haze, dusk and shadow. From this perspective, choking on smoke might also mean infusing life into myths. The contradiction is obvious. Ventilation means compromise. The smoke hole is a lifeline, but it has never been completely successful. The cold forced the roof to curve. The big fire forced it open. Every family walks on a hard road every night, adjusting, coughing and enduring. When you curl up even deeper in this imagined hole, you realize that you are also trapped in that ancient negotiation. Every breath is a reminder. Warmth is never free. Your back was aching from the hard wooden board, so you moved a little and discovered another secret of the Vikings' night, the raised sleeping platform. These are neither luxurious beds with carved pillars nor mattresses covered with feathers. They are simple benches built along the long wall of the house, wide enough for a family to lie on. Sometimes it's just a rough plank or a layer of branches woven from straw, but compared with lying directly on the dirty floor, they took a step towards comfort and more importantly, survived. Archaeologists discovered the traces of these platforms in the excavated hole, in the holes of the columns on the wall, in the faded soil where the wood once stayed, and even in the soil, they found layers of rotten straw. The evidence is consistent enough that most scholars believe these raised benches are standard features. Sleeping off the ground has two purposes at the same time. You avoided the dark cold seeping from the ground, and you kept away from small animals and pests. This is an obvious way of adaptation, but it is only learned by those who froze before you after a painful lesson. Now, imagine you are lying on these benches. Where your body is lifted to a height of 1 or 2 feet from the soil, you will immediately feel cold. The floor itself is very dark, dampened, uneven, but on the wooden board, you can feel the air circulating instead of the mud pressing into your bones. A thin layer of straw concealed the hardness of the wood, and the animal's fur hung over the shoulders, just like a thick musk blanket. The difference between shivering at night and falling into an uneasy dream often lies in the simple wooden window stand. There is an unusual detail here. Some of the benches for sleeping also serve as storage spaces. People stuff their personal belongings, tools and sometimes even food onto them, turning the raised bed into functional furniture. You might lie down knowing that the iron axe you sharpened earlier is right under your head, or that your winter root vegetables have been safely hidden away to prevent them from being gnawed by goats. This is not luxury, but efficiency. But how many people share these benches? The answer seems to be as many as possible. The similarities between the legendary textual descriptions and the ethnographic ones suggest that the entire family was crammed together, sometimes with children between their parents and sometimes with relatives or servants in the same row. Privacy is the dream of modern people. In this longhouse, warmth is more important than dignity. Your neighbor's elbow might have poked your ribs, or their snoring might have shaken your skull, but their body temperature kept you alive. The experts still had differences over the breadth of these platforms. Some reconstructions show that the narrow bench is not much larger than a modern single bed. Others depict wide wall racks extending to the length of the wall, more like public sofas rather than individual beds. The debate is still ongoing due to incomplete evidence. When you lie in the hole you imagine, you can envision these two possibilities: a narrow personal plank or a wide public shelf, where half of the family members are piled up in a jumble of linen blankets. This feeling is very easy to be summoned. You climb up, feeling the stream beneath your body, lying in the straw. It will scratch your skin, but it smells faintly sweet. Above are the rafters under the snow. Beside you, someone moved a little, muttered to themselves in their sleep, and then moved closer to you. Here, you will never feel true loneliness and will never be far away from the warmth and hustle and bustle of others. A particularly strange discovery was made at a site in Denmark. Layers of charred straw bedding were found, indicating that sometimes when sparks flew too far, these benches would catch fire. Imagine waking up suddenly when your mattress is smoldering beneath you. Is every household cursing? They just covered it with their cloaks and lay back down. They were so tired that they didn't care at all. Archaeological scars make you guess, but they vividly remind us of how unstable life is. A fireplace in the middle was burning just a few feet away, and the bench also played another subtle role. They transformed that longhouse into a roofed environment. The warm, frozen smoke filled the air. The person sitting on the bench found himself in the middle, neither frozen on the ground nor choked by the rafters, but somewhere in between. You may not be able to breathe completely fresh air, but you haven't suffocated either. This is a compromising stance, a practical middle ground carved out from the building itself. In addition to their functions, these raised sleep points also shape social life. The bench closest to the fire may be occupied by elders or people of higher status, while the less popular corners are reserved for servants or guests. Sleep arrangements quietly reveal the hierarchy. The position of the body reflects the position of power. You might think this is the Viking version of the seating chart, which is only executed every night. Therefore, when you immerse yourself more deeply in the imagined bedding, you will feel both grateful and uncomfortable. Thank you for not lying directly in the mud, shivering with cold. You feel uncomfortable being pushed around by your relatives. Your skin is scratched by straw, and the sparks from the flames are too close and uncomfortable. This is the bed of the Vikings, rough and smoky. It is shared but indispensable. The raised platform is not a luxury suite. But when the winter outside howls and the world freezes, that's enough. Get enough rest and survive. Where you close your eyes in the flickering firelight, you understand that sometimes survival does not depend on conquering the cold, but on finding the smallest edge to resist it. A plank, a layer of straw, and a place one step higher than the ground. You stroke the surface of the bedding with your fingers and realize that what was beneath your feet was not just rough straw or wooden boards. There is a hierarchical system and an inherent need in work. First, there are mattresses made of hay or reeds, which are updated as frequently as possible in each household. Then there is the wool blanket, and finally the most precious thing is the thick animal skin. These are the Vikings' dewy, heavy yet warm. Their musky scent reminds you that the smell of survival is more like that of sheep and reindeer than lavender. Archaeological excavations have unearthed remnants of bed materials, charred straw fragments, strands of wool, and even mountain wool woven into blankets. These fragments confirm what legendary stories sometimes imply. Wool is the cornerstone of comfort. The sheep in Scandinavia are cold minus resistant and thick. The fibers produced after their coat are strong enough to withstand endless winters. When wool was spun into blankets or cloaks, it could retain heat even in damp conditions. This was a magical fabric long before Gore-Tex came into being. You might wrinkle your nose because of the itch, but your body thanks it for the warmth it brings. Here is an interesting inside story. Not all bedding is purely local. Some furs come from distant trade routes. There are bear skins in the north and beaver skins in the east. Even luxurious Lapland reindeer skins. Then you understand. Sleep is public, but also interwoven. Written materials and ethnographic comparisons show that sleep before industrialization was usually segmented. People doze off for several hours, wake up in the evening, and then fall into a second sleep before dawn. Some researchers believe that the Vikings might have followed this pattern as well. After all, it's needed to take care of the stove. The fire needs to be reignited. Adjustment of smoke, exhaust holes. Animal inspection. In the pitch-minus dark winter of Scandinavia, waking up from time to time is part of survival. Now imagine it. Around you, half of the hole is snoring, while some blurry figures are moving quietly in the haze. A person knelt beside the fire and placed a log on the embers. Another person led a goat outside, muttering to himself in the cold. The third person just sat in the half-minus aisle with wide eyes, thinking or praying. Sleep here is not absolute. It is fluid, the rise and fall and flow of the tide at night. A well-minus supported fact is that legendary stories occasionally describe the midnight moment, as if characters would wake up in the dark for a while. Some stories even mention conversations or reflections that take place in the middle of the night, rather than being regarded as interruptions but rather natural pauses in the rhythm of rest. For the Viking family, night was not a completely unconscious place, but a common and ever-minus changing landscape, including dozing off, waking up, tending and dreaming. Then a strange scene emerged. A child woke up in the dark, asked his parents to tell a story, and then fell asleep again. These legendary tales themselves might have been born within 2 hours, when half of the people in the hall were awake and the voices drowned out the crackling of the fire. What better time could there be to pass on the stories of gods and heroes in the silence between the first and second sleeps? Scholars will of course debate the consistency of this approach. Some people insist that segmented sleep was almost universal before the advent of artificial lighting, while others warn that there is insufficient evidence and that it often comes from later sources. Did the Vikings follow this wraith, and every night or only in the endless dark winter? The truth lies somewhere between certainty and speculation, but the patterns of the fire and livestock care suggest a high possibility. Now imagine you waking up from a dream. Your body is warm under the fur, but your lungs hurt from the smoke. You cough, sit up and see that others have already woken up. This is a kind of comfort. Everyone admits that the night cannot be conquered by one person alone. You toss and turn on another piece of wood, perhaps muttering a few words to the deities or ancestors, and then slowly lie down, waiting for sleepiness to return. This rhythm also means that the nights of the Vikings were not a quiet extension, but were interrupted by life, the scraping of burning wood, the sound of benches as people moved, and the fluctuating sizes of animals. Even going outside to a cold place to relax breaks the monotony. Your eyes saw the aurora hovering above, and then you fled back into the house. These interruptions stitched themselves into memory, making each night a woven fabric, rather than a blank. Think about how this changes the experience of time. In that longhouse, darkness is not the emptiness to endure, but a canvas that spans the passage of time. People come and go in a days like fish in a stream. Perhaps this explains why the Vikings seldom measured their days in minutes, but more often in tasks. Feed the animals, make a fire, share a tale, and then fall asleep again, so you have to adapt to the pace by yourself. The first sleep, when awake, the second sleep. Your breathing rose and fell with the pulsation of the whole. The modern concept of a person's solid, private and quiet night has vanished. Instead, there is a common rend, a cycle of warmth, vigilance and dreams, though fragmented, still intact to some extent. The night is getting deeper and deeper. Although your body is resting, your ears are awake. In this crowded longhouse, silence has never truly arrived. On the contrary, the air was filled with overlapping sounds, and the chorus of humans and animals echoed in the smoke-filled beams of light. You heard it all, singing, murmuring, snoring, the gurgling of wood, and the coughing of a person with lungs filled with soot. For the Vikings, this was the original sound of sleep. Archaeologists cannot dig up sounds, but the similarities in legends and ethnography provide clues. Imagine that after dinner, when the family begins to settle down, someone might recite a poem or a legendary passage, plunging these words into darkness. None of these are formal performances. They are bedtime habits and ways to kill time before the first wave of sleep. The chief's hall might echo stories of the gods Odin, Thor, or local heroes, while the farmers' houses might be filled with lullabies whispering to their restless children. No matter what, the story and the song are like the straw behind you, firmly sewn into the night. For once the sound disappears, another sound will ring out, and that is snoring. Imagine dozens of corpses crammed onto a bench, their cloaks pulled tightly, and the airways blocked by smoke and fatigue. This discordant sound must be very unusual. Some ethnologists who study traditional Scandinavian farmhouses describe them as sound barns where no one truly sleeps in peace. You are now lying there, squeezed among your loved ones, snoring so loudly that your ears sound like a storm outside. Here is a strange narrator. Some legendary stories even make fun of people who sleep loudly. The characters made thunderous sounds at night, as if everyone in the hall was destined to share the pain. Humor has been passed down precisely because it is so common. Snoring is inevitable in a room crowded with exhausted corpses and poorly ventilated. Imagine that when you know you are dozing off and cursing your neighbor, your throat is trembling. Then there are animals. Cows wriggle in the pen, goats bleed gently, and pigs hum in their dreams. Every kind of noise is amplified in the reverberating wooden shell. Some scholars believe that this continuous sound of animal calls might be a strange, comforting evidence that these animals, their families, wealth and lives are safe at night. Others, however, find it maddening, constantly reminding you that you live not only in a house, but also in a barn. Both of these viewpoints are correct. It depends on your tolerance. Now think about that fire again. When logs are burned, they crackle, hiss and spark in the darkness. The fireplace itself was also noisy. It was an restless companion and never allowed the room to be completely quiet. Sometimes the movement of the wood would wake up a person who was sleeping lightly, and he would wake up others. The chain of sounds rippled in the hall, making the night never peaceful. Modern readers often imagine sleep as a private and peaceful escape, but for the Vikings, it was an entirely different matter. Sleep is social. You sleep in a soundscape interwoven by every sound, every cough and every breath of an animal. Privacy is a dream, submerged in the steady hum of life within the wooden walls. Do people feel very tired, or have they never experienced silence before? Have they fallen asleep easily? Have their hearts been soothed by the familiar voices they share? One thing is certain: legendary stories often describe nights filled with speeches. Heroes praise each other, women sing, and children listen. This indicates that the noise is not only tolerable, but also expected. This is part of the rhythm of family life. The transition from oral storytelling to snoring is seamless. The continuous sound from consciousness to unconsciousness. Just an hour ago, we were singing praises of Thor's lungs, but now they are roaring like a sleeping bull. Thinking of this, you might laugh. Scholars continue to discuss how these persistent voices shape culture. Some people think it has cultivated resilience. If you can sleep with the goat bleeding and your uncle snoring, you can endure anything. Others, however, believe that it reinforces the tradition of storytelling. Because the time spent awake in the dark was too long, the story became the core of community identity. The evidence leaves room for both interpretations. When you listen in the Longhouse, you will feel that both are true. Now, fill your ears with the imagined chorus, the rhythm of breathing, the brook on the roof, the occasional crying of a child, and the deep nest where a cow crouches. These sounds come together to weave a lullaby, perhaps harsh, but familiar and comforting. You know, for the Vikings, sleeping was not an escape from the world. He was immersed in it, submitting to the noise, smoke and beating heart of this Longhouse at night. As time goes by, you realize that warmth is not merely fire, fur, or a tight body. It also comes from within, from what you ate before lying down. The diet of the Vikings mainly consisted of grains, meat and dairy products, ball-thick foods that can make the body burn. Filling your stomach with porridge or grilled mutton will generate slowly burning energy, allowing you to get through the night. Without it, even under the thickest reindeer skin, you would tremble. Archaeological research on the Vikings' toilets and garbage dumps clearly depicts what sustained these nights. Barley and dry bread, thick soups of peas and beans, stewed lamb or pork, and dairy products from cows and goats. These foods are not merely nutritional supplements. They are edible insulating materials. You can almost taste a bowl of barley porridge with honey, which is heavy in your stomach and warms you when you curl up on the straw bed. Here is a strange little detail. Bones unearthed from Viking sites sometimes show no sign that bone marrow is a precious midnight snack. Imagine a child chewing on a roasted bone before going to bed. After that, the greasy fingers were stuffed into the fur. Not glamorous but practical. Fat provides concentrated calories and keeps you warm for a long time after the fire has burned out. What still puzzles researchers is how evenly these foods are distributed. Do wealthy families prefer a diet rich in meat, while poor families only eat grains and thin soups? There is evidence suggesting the existence of a gap. Some graves are rich in animal protein, while others mainly consist of plant-based diets. This means that in the same village, one family might eat well and sleep warmly, while another family might go to bed hungry and cold. When you imagine yourself here, the impact of diet on sleep can be felt. When you are full, your body relaxes, your limbs feel heavy, and warmth radiates from within. Without food, the cold was even more bone-chilling, and each time the wind blew, it was even more bone-chilling. No wonder banquets held during the winter season are such important events. They are more than just celebrations. They are survival strategies to fill one's stomach during the coldest time of the year. Imagine this scene. After a sumptuous stew had been stewed in the central stove all night, the family sat on the bench, straightened their stomachs, and warmth spread throughout their hearts. The longhouses shrouded in smoke may still be well-ventilated, but the flames within them are burning. Even the animals benefited from the hay and leftovers fed to them, and their own bellies were churning warmly, increasing the collective heat in the hall. When hunger no longer torments your ribs, you will fall asleep more easily. Another odd anecdote comes from saga literature. Heroes are sometimes described as those who eat a lot before taking a break. It seems that a simple appetite is a sign of strength. There is a story about a man who swallowed a whole piece of meat and then fell to the ground snoring. Is this an exaggeration? It's almost certain, but it reflects a cultural truth that eating well means sleeping well, and both are signs of health and vitality. However, historians still disagree on the extent to which diet alleviated the common cold. Some people believe that high-calorie foods are indispensable in the subarctic climate, serving as an internal insulator. Others, however, believe that although diet plays a role, clothing and bedding have a much greater impact. They pointed out that even the best eaten body could not withstand the bone-chilling wind without wool and fur. The debate remains unresolved. You can only chew on the imagined barley bread while weighing the two viewpoints. Sleeping under such a quilt is not only comfortable, but also a kind of status. Imagine lying under a glittering fur that has drifted hundreds of miles away, proving that your family possesses wealth or connections. Bedding itself has become a quiet symbol of prestige. Now get a little closer and feel its touch. The straw below is scratching, the wool above is scratching, and the fur on the chest is very heavy. However, together they form a cocoon to resist the air currents passing through the turf wool. Without these layers, the cold would spread mercilessly, numbing the toes and stiffening the joints. With them you might really fall asleep instead of shivering all night. Experts still question just how thick these layers are. Some reconstructions show only a few inches of straw. Others suggest replacing the deep pile regularly, just like the original mattress. There is even a debate about whether the animal skin is mainly laid beneath or above the sleeper. Are you lying on the front covering yourself with wool, or the other way around? Physical evidence cannot solve the problem. Academic debates are still ongoing. You can only test versions in your imagination to find out which one is less likely to be bitten by fleas. Because fleas were unexpected guests of the Vikings every time they spent the night. Wool and fur may be worn, but they are also perfect habitats for pests. Archaeological research on Viking cemeteries has revealed traces of insect remains in clothing and bedding. Obvious signs indicate that itching is part of nighttime life. You might laugh at a warrior who bravely faces the icy ocean but curses the little creatures under the blanket. Survival has never been a glamorous thing. Then, the wool smells of flaxseed oil, earth and a hint of oiliness. The leather coats carry the musk from the animals they once wore. The longhouse was filled with the breath of life, primitive and unfiltered, with the smoke from the fire and the moisture from the grass walls mixed together. Have people noticed? Or did their senses fully adapt, and the smell of this bunch of animals, soil and ashes, turned into the scent of home? Anthropologists suspect the latter and point out how fast humans have normalized the environment. There is a charming detail in legends and folklore. Bedding is sometimes blessed or cursed. Covering a child with a layer of skin might be accompanied by some whispers praying to protect them from the invasion of the cold spirit. This indicates that the blanket is not only a physical barrier, but also a mental one. Wrapping oneself in fur is like wrapping oneself in safety, which is both practical and mysterious. Imagine a mother smoothing her son's fur and whispering prayers to Thor or Freya, hoping for a peaceful night. Think about the tactile rhythms of these nights. You changed to a crumpled straw under your body, pulled the woolen cloak above your chin, and felt the heavy pull of the fur pressing you down. The air can still make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but the heat from your body will accumulate beneath these layers, turning the discomfort into a feeling closer to relief. At that moment, survival didn't seem like a hero. It feels quite ordinary. It's just another night I'd endured, yet another dawn I'm waiting for after the snow. So you close your eyes and immerse yourself in that layer upon layer of nests, realizing how simple materials, grass, wool and animal skins, have become the techniques for survival. There are no silk bed sheets, no down beds, only the ingenious use of what nature offers. However, despite the itching, pests and heaviness, you still fell asleep, because in the world of the Vikings, this was enough. The fur on your chest feels heavier than wool and softer than straw, and there is no doubt that it is foreign. You will notice the difference immediately. This is neither a sheep grazing outside the longhouse, nor a goat bleeding at night. This fur has already traveled. Its texture tells you that it once belonged to a beaver, or perhaps even a bear. These animals are not native to your farm. This realization opened a new window for understanding the life of the Vikings. Their bedding is not only resourceful in the local area, but also part of a broader trade network. Archaeological evidence and written records indicate that the Vikings did not live in isolation. They sailed, plundered and traded, and the goods brought through these networks reshaped their homeland. Among them, the most precious is fur. The furs of reindeer and foxes come from Smith in northern Scandinavia. Merchants brought beaver skins, mink skins and marten skins from the dense forests of present-day Russia, the Baltic Sea. Lying in such a quilt is not just about warmth. This is a proof of status. Owning imported furs indicates that your family has sufficient influence and wealth to acquire them. A well-documented fact is that fur was the cornerstone of Vikings' commerce. Tributes from conquered lands usually appeared in the form of furs. Merchants as far as the Middle East were extremely envious of the furs from the north because of their rarity and insulation. In fact, fragments of Arab silver coins found in Scandinavian soil suggest this kind of trade. The fur moves southward and the silver moves northward. Some of the furs were not only used for cloaks, but also for bedding, making the Vikings' nights soft. But there is also a strange story. Medieval chroniclers would occasionally describe that the Smites not only exchanged reindeer skins for tools or ironware, but also for dairy products, suggesting that the warmth of their bedding might indeed have been bought with buckets of milk or cheese. Imagine a Viking farmer grabbing a bundle of reindeer skin earned from goat cheese, dragging it home and proudly spreading it on the bed in his house. Survival is pieced together through unexpected bargaining. When you press your cheeks against these imported furs, your experience is different from that of local wool. Fur is smoother, softer and usually warmer. Especially reindeer skin, renowned for its insulating properties, is even used in modern Arctic expeditions. Imagine how easy it would be for a Viking child to crawl under such a quilt, feeling its weight and warmth. Hide in the grass wall to avoid the through wind. For that child, it was necessary to traverse miles of icy wilderness to survive. Scholars are still debating the popularity of these imported furs in daily household. Some people believe that they are rare luxuries reserved for wealthy chiefs and their families. Others, however, believe that due to the extensive trade, even simple farmers would occasionally sleep under the fur of foreign countries, at least on special occasions or in the harshest winters. The evidence is scattered and fragmented, and the truth lies in the grey area, neither entirely universal nor entirely elite. But whether rare or not, this symbolic meaning is very important. For represents prestige. They clearly demonstrated their connection outside the village. It symbolizes the sphere of influence of the Vikings. Lying under imported fur is not just about comfort. This was a sentence whispered in the smoke-filled darkness. It belonged to something larger than this hole. Close your eyes and imagine that feeling. Now your shoulders are submerged in softness. The heat in your body is sealed layer by layer, which is more effective than local wool. Around you, others are muttering to themselves in their sleep, perhaps jealous of your fur or comforted by your own fur. The flames flickered, smokes whirled, and the snow outside piled higher. Not only are you wrapped in warmth, but also in the long lines of trade, war and travel, which link the Viking age together. In this way, even the act of sleeping has become part of the global network. You will think of silver coins crossing the ocean, beaver skins changing hands in the forest clearing, and caravans marching silently on the snow-covered paths. All of this ended in this longhouse, and you finally relaxed enough to float into your restless dreams. Firm itch. They may have a faint musky scent, but they carry the air of distant lands. In the severe winter of Scandinavia, it is a magical feeling that determines whether you wake up trembling or sleep until dawn. You move under the thick leather and realize how crowded this space is. For a family, this longhouse is not a quiet retreat. This is a beehive. The bench by the wall was filled with people, not rows of neatly arranged sleepers, but a blind mess of corpses, grandparents, parents, children, servants, and even occasional guests. Everyone was huddled side by side. This is a requirement of the building itself. The wall is so thick and the space is so precious. The best way to keep warm is to share the air, and sometimes even the same blanket with others. Archaeologists studying the ruins of longhouses often point out the huge scale of these holes, some of which are as long as 20 or 30 meters. This is not because the Vikings wanted more space. This is because multiple family units, sometimes several generations, live under one roof. Rather than being a house, it is more of a community building, and miniature village trapped in a smoke-filled wooden shell. A surviving story casually mentions that 3 families share a hall. Now you can almost feel the physical pressure as you try to turn over without knocking someone in the face. These benefits are feasible. More people mean more calories. More than a dozen corpses huddled together, forming a microclimate that shared warmth. In an era when insulating materials were imperfect and fires were unreliable, this kind of collective heating was a survival strategy. You may not like sleeping beside a grumpy uncle or a servant who hasn't taken a bath for months, but their body temperature might mean that you are still alive when you wake up. There is also a strange little episode circulating in folktales. It is said that some families will strategically arrange for their children to sleep among adults to keep them warm to the greatest extent. Imagine you are sandwiched between 2 snoring parents, wrapped in cloaks, while your cousins and grandparents form a human wall to block the cold air seeping in through the door. The longhouse no longer resembled a bedroom, but more like a blanket. Everyone's body was sewn into the quilt of survival. However, such an intimate relationship comes at a price. The privacy you understand does not exist. Every cough, every muttering to oneself, every restless turn around, everyone in the room knowing. The whispers of an argument are impossible not to be heard. Intimacy has never been true privacy. However, for the Vikings, this was normal. A feeling of modern people would be called suffocating. They call it life. Scholars are still striving to study how these shared spaces shape social dynamics. Does a sustained close relationship strengthen kinship or trigger escalating tensions? Some anthropologists believe that such close regions have given birth to extraordinary cooperation. Families who had to endure nasal congestion at night learned to be patient and tolerant. Others, however, counter that the legendary tales brimming with hatred and competition imply the opposite situation, where lengths piled up like firewood stir up resentment as well as unity. Both of these viewpoints hold water. Lying on the straw mat, you might agree with one of them, depending on whose elbow bumped your rib. Now close your eyes and imagine a sensory storm. Share the warmth of the body. The smell of sweat, wool and smoke mingled together. The snoring echoed in the hall like a chorus. Somewhere there is a baby making a fuss. In another place, a dog was growling softly in its sleep. This is not a peaceful silence. This is a discordant voice. However, amid the hustle and bustle, there is also comfort. You will never be alone. A strange phenomenon was discovered at the excavation site. Sometimes, the height of the benches seems to be slightly different, possibly separating the sleeping area of one family from that of another. You might imagine the shallow ledge along the city wall, with each tribe claiming its own level. This arrangement not only created warmth, but also hierarchy. His bench was seated closest to the stove, which was diverted to the ventilated end of the door. At the daytime banquet, the political issue of arranging sleep is as loud as speaking. So, when you are immersed in the imagination of this crowded hall, you will realize some important things. The longhouse is not designed for individuals. It is designed for this group. Survival is not an individual act. It is public, noisy, and sometimes uncomfortable, but very humanized. Not only do you share stories and meals, but you also share your body temperature, night after night, winter after winter. Amidst that sweltering, smoky, and undeniably crowded atmosphere, there is also a sense of security. If danger approaches, if a storm hits the roof, if illness strikes, you won't be isolated. You are surrounded and woven into the fabric of kinship. In the world of the Vikings, this kind of intimacy might have been the warmest. You stir in the smoky darkness. The warmth you feel does not merely come from the oppression of your family, it comes from something larger and heavier at the other end of the hall. There, behind wooden partitions, or low fences, animals moved around, exhaling heat and moisture, adding mist to the longhouse. Cattle, sheep, goats, and even pigs often live on rooftops with their human breeders. Although it may sound uncomfortable to modern people, this mixture of species was one of the most practical heating systems of the Vikings. Archaeological excavations keep uncovering longhouses divided into several parts. One end is used for living and the other for raising livestock, sometimes only separated by a waist-high wall. The evidence is beyond doubt. grooves for feeding were chiseled into the floor, holes for fences were chiseled into the pillars, and even layers of compacted fertilizer were still retained in the soil. This is not a guess. These holes all serve as barns. When winter comes, animals won't be left outside to freeze to death. They became roommates, just like breathing stoves, making the human part of the house a little warmer. Close your eyes and imagine, in the smoke-filled air, there was a strong and pungent smell of hay and manure. The sound of hooves kept moving. From the other side of the partition wall came the deep breathing of a cow. At first, it seems unbearable, but then you will feel warm, subtle yet steady. It runs through the entire hall like the second half. Each animal turned into a radiator, and their bodies emitted invisible heat under the grassy roof. A reliable fact is that the body heat produced by cows is impressive. Modern farmers can even calculate this. They know that a cow emits hundreds of watts of energy. Multiply it by a group, and suddenly you'll have a natural heating system. The Vikings might not have measured it in watts, but they understood its value. Livestock is not merely food on their hooves. They are companions of winter, supporting human survival with every breath they exhale. Here is a strange and interesting detail. Legendary tales and later folklores sometimes make fun of the taste of these arrangements, in which characters are ridiculed for sleeping with cows. This kind of humor indicates that everyone knows it is both necessary and unpleasant. Imagine you rolled over, pulled your cloak up to your nose, and spent the whole night complaining that your neighbor's goat is bleeding. However, when the storm is raging outside, you will be grateful for every warm breath that wafts through the wall. Experts are still debating how closely the animal and human parts are combined. Some reconstructions show clear barriers, and the animals are neatly confined. Others, however, consider this merely a symbolic distinction, meaning that if you're not careful, the goat might dangerously approach your bedding. The lack of a complete internal structure leaves an unresolved issue. You can only imagine diversions, sometimes orderly, sometimes chaotic, but always filled with the unbearable scents and sounds of a modern bedroom. The emergence of animals not only changed the climate but also altered the rhythm of sleep. You will hear the sound of hooves, the chewing of hay, the snorting of animals lying down and their sighs. The children might have found comfort in these sounds. They were hypnotized by the heartbeat of the cows as they entered the night. On the other hand, when an unruly sheep is awakened in the middle of the night and bleating loudly, adults may curse. In any case, sleep is never completely quiet. Some researchers even believe that the feces at the far end of the hall release a little heat when they decompose. You might laugh at the Vikings' homes heated with feces, but decomposition does generate heat. Is it obvious or just a smelly by-minus product? The debate has remained unresolved, making you wonder if these stinky piles really help prevent children's toes from freezing. In addition to warmth, livestock also bring another kind of security. Keeping your animals inside means they are not harmed by predators and thieves. In a world where family wealth is measured by cattle and sheep, guarding them all night is not an option. You and your goat endure the same smoke, not for fun, but because it means survival for both of you. So as you sink deeper and deeper into this imagined long house, the warmth around you is layered and complex. The flame was flickering in the center. Their family was breathing deeply on the bench, while the animals were exhaling steadily at the other end of the bench. The entire hall becomes an ecosystem that shares heat. You might wrinkle your nose at the spicinces, but you'll also breathe a sigh of relief, because in the cold north, every warm breath is important, no matter who or what it comes from. As the night grew darker, you realized something astonishing. No one here wants to sleep for 8 hours without being disturbed. This idea belongs to your modern clock, not the Viking world. In this longhouse, rest is fragmented and often alternating, as the body gets up and lies down according to the fire, household chores and the unpredictable rhythm of life. You wake up in the middle of the night, see someone fiddling with embers, and hear another person stand up outside to relieve themselves. Then you understand. Sleep is public, but also interwoven. Written materials and ethnographic comparisons show that sleep before industrialization was usually segmented. People doze off for several hours, wake up in the evening, and then fall into a second sleep before dawn. Some researchers believe that the Vikings might have followed this pattern as well. After all, it's needed to take care of the stove. The fire needs to be reignited. Adjustment of smoke exhaust holes. Animal inspection. In the pitch-dark winter of Scandinavia, waking up from time to time is part of survival. Now imagine it. Around you, half of the hall is snoring, while some blurry figures are moving quietly in the haze. A person knelt beside the fire and placed a log on the embers. Another person led a goat outside, muttering to himself in the cold. The third person just sat in the half-minus aisle with wide eyes, thinking or praying. Sleep here is not absolute. It is fluid, the rise and fall and flow of the tide at night. Hewell Minus supported factors that legendary stories occasionally describe the midnight moment, as if characters would wake up in the dark for a while. Some stories even mention conversations or reflections that take place in the middle of the night, rather than being regarded as interruptions but rather natural pauses in the rhythm of rest. For the Viking family, night was not a completely unconscious place, but a common and ever-minus changing landscape, including dozing off, waking up, tending and dreaming. Then, a strange scene emerged. A child woke up in the dark, asked his parents to tell a story, and then fell asleep again. These legendary tales themselves might have been born within 2 hours, when half of the people in the hall were awakened. The voices drowned out the crackling of the fire. What better time could there be to pass on the stories of gods and heroes in silence between the first and second sleeps? Scholars will of course debate the consistency of this approach. Some people insist that segmented sleep was almost universal before the advent of artificial lighting, while others warn that there is insufficient evidence but it often comes from later sources. Did the Vikings follow this rhythm every night or only in the endless dark winter? The truth lies somewhere between certainty and speculation, but the patterns of the fire and livestock care suggest a high possibility. Now imagine you waking up from a dream. Your body is warm under the fur, but your lungs hurt from the smoke. You cough, sit up and see that others have already woken up. This is a kind of comfort. Everyone admits that the night cannot be conquered by one person alone. You toss and turn on another piece of wood, perhaps muttering a few words to the deities or ancestors, and then slowly lie down, waiting for sleepiness to return. This rhythm also means that the nights of the Vikings were not a quiet extension, but were interrupted by life, the scraping of burning wood, the sound of benches as people moved, and the fluctuating sizes of animals. Even going outside to a cold place to relax breaks the monotony. Your eyes saw the aurora hovering above, and then you fled back into the house. These interruptions stitched themselves into memory, making each night a woven fabric rather than a blank. Think about how this changes the experience of time. In that long house, darkness is not the emptiness to endure, but a canvas that spans the passage of time. People come and go in a daze like fish in a stream. Perhaps this explains why the Vikings seldom measured their days in minutes, but more often in tasks. Feed the animals, make a fire, share a tale, and then fall asleep again. So you have to adapt to the pace by yourself. The first sleep, when awake, the second sleep. Your breathing rose and fell with the pulsation of the hall. The modern concept of a person's solid, private and quiet night has vanished. Instead, there is a common rend, a cycle of warmth, vigilance and dreams, though fragmented, still intact to some extent. The night is getting deeper and deeper. Although your body is resting, your ears are awake. In this crowded long house, silence has never truly arrived. On the contrary, the air was filled with overlapping sounds, and the chorus of humans and animals echoed in the smoke-filled beams of light. You heard it all: singing, murmuring, snoring, the gurgling of wood, and the coughing of a person with lungs filled with soot. For the Vikings, this was the original sound of sleep. Archaeologists cannot dig up sounds, but the similarities in legends and ethnography provide clues. Imagine that after dinner, when the family begins to settle down, someone might recite a poem or a legendary passage, plunging these words into darkness. None of these are formal performances. They are bedtime habits and ways to kill time before the first wave of sleep. The chief's hall might echo stories of the gods Odin, Thor or local heroes, while the farmers' houses might be filled with lullabies whispering to their restless children. And at what, the The story and the song are like the straw behind you, firmly sewn into the night. For at once the sound disappears, another sound will ring out, and that is snoring. Imagine dozens of corpses crammed onto a bench, their cloaks pulled tightly, and the airways blocked by smoke and fatigue. This discordant sound must be very unusual. Some ethnologists who study traditional Scandinavian farmhouses describe them as sound barns where no one truly sleeps in peace. You are now lying there, squeezed among your loved ones, snoring so loudly that your ears sound like a storm outside. Here is a strange narrator. Some legendary stories even make fun of people who sleep loudly. The characters made thunderous sounds at night, as if everyone in the hall was destined to share the pain. Humor has been passed down precisely because it is so common. Snoring is inevitable in a room crowded with exhausted corpses and poorly ventilated. Imagine that when you know you are dozing off and cursing your neighbor, your throat is trembling. Then there are animals. Cows wriggle in the pen, goats bleat gently, and pigs hum in their dreams. Every kind of noise is amplified in the reverberating wooden shell. Some scholars believe that this continuous sound of animal calls might be a strange, comforting evidence that these animals, their families' wealth and lives are safe at night. Others, however, find it maddening, constantly reminding you that you live not only in a house, but also in a barn. Both of these viewpoints are correct. It depends on your tolerance. Now think about that fire again. When logs are burned, they crackle, hiss and spark in the darkness. The fireplace itself was also noisy. It was an restless companion, and never allowed the room to be completely quiet. Sometimes, the movement of the wood would wake up a person who was sleeping lightly, and he would wake up others. The chain of sounds rippled, then the whole, making the night never peaceful. Modern readers often imagine sleep as a private and peaceful escape, but for the Vikings, it was an entirely different matter. Sleep is social. You sleep in a soundscape interwoven by every sound, every cough and every breath of an animal. Privacy is a dream, submerged in the steady hum of life within the wooden walls. Do people feel very tired? Or have they never experienced silence before? Have they fallen asleep easily? Have their hearts been soothed by the familiar voices they share? One thing is certain: legendary stories often describe nights filled with speeches. Heroes praise each other, women sing, and children listen. This indicates that the noise is not only tolerable, but also expected. This is part of the rhythm of family life. The transition from oral storytelling to snoring is seamless. A continuous sound from consciousness to unconsciousness. Just an hour ago, we were singing praises of Thor's lungs, but now they're roaring like a sleeping bull. Thinking of this, you might laugh. Scholars continue to discuss how these persistent voices shape culture. Some people think it has cultivated resilience. If you can sleep with the goat bleating and your uncle snoring, you can endure anything. Others, however, believe that it reinforces the tradition of storytelling. Because the time spent awake in the dark was too long, the story became the core of community identity. The evidence leaves room for both interpretations. When you listen in the Longhouse, you will feel that both are true. Now, fill your ears with the imagined chorus, the rhythm of breathing, the brook on the roof, the occasional crying of a child, and the deep nest where a cow crouches. These sounds come together to weave a lullaby, perhaps harsh, but familiar and comforting. For the Vikings, sleeping was not an escape from the world. He was immersed in it, submitting to the noise, smoke and beating heart of this Longhouse at night. As time goes by, you realize that warmth is not merely fire, fur, or a tight body. It also comes from within, from what you ate before lying down. The diet of the Vikings mainly consisted of grains, meat and dairy products, bold thick foods that can make the body burn. Filling your stomach with porridge or grilled mutton will generate slowly burning energy, allowing you to get through the night. Without it, even under the thick, strained air skin, you would tremble. Archaeological research on the Vikings' toilets and garbage dumps clearly depicts what sustained these nights. Barley and dry bread, thick soups of peas and beans, stewed lamb or pork, and dairy products from cows and goats. These foods are not merely nutritional supplements. They are edible insulating materials. You can almost taste a bowl of barley porridge with honey, which is heavy in your stomach and warms you when you curl up on the straw bed. Here is a strange little detail. Bones unearthed from Viking sites sometimes show no sign that bone marrow is a precious midnight snack. Imagine a child chewing on a roasted bone before going to bed. After that, the greasy fingers were stuffed into the fur. Not glamorous but practical. Fat provides concentrated calories and keeps you warm for a long time after the fire has burned out. What still puzzles researchers is how evenly these foods are distributed. Do wealthy families prefer a diet rich in meat, while poor families only eat grains and thin soups? There is evidence suggesting the existence of a gap. Some graves are rich in animal protein, while others mainly consist of plant-based diets. This means that in the same village, one family might eat well and sleep warmly, while another family might go to bed hungry and cold. When you imagine yourself here, the impact of diet on sleep can be felt. When you are full, your body relaxes, your limbs feel heavy, and warmth radiates from within. Without food, the cold was even more bone-chilling, and each time the wind blew, it was even more bone-chilling. No wonder banquets held during the winter season are such important events. They are more than just celebrations. They are survival strategies to fill one's stomach during the coldest time of the year. Imagine this scene. After a sumptuous stew had been stewed in the central stove all night, the family sat on the bench, straightened their stomachs, and warmth spread throughout their hearts. The longhouses, shrouded in smoke, may still be well-ventilated, but the flames within them are burning. Even the animals benefited from the high-end leftovers fed to them, and their own bellies were burning warmly, increasing the collective heat in the hall. When hunger no longer torments your ribs, you will fall asleep more easily. Another odd anecdote comes from saga literature. Heroes are sometimes described as those who eat a lot before taking a break. It seems that a simple appetite is a sign of strength. There is a story about a man who swallowed a whole piece of meat and then fell to the ground snoring. Is this an exaggeration? It's almost certain. But it reflects a cultural truth that eating well means sleeping well, and both the signs of health and vitality. However, historians still disagree on the extent to which diet alleviated the common cold. Some people believe that high-calorie foods are indispensable in the subarctic climate, serving as an internal insulator. Others, however, believe that although diet plays a role, clothing and bedding have a much greater impact. They pointed out that even the best eaten body could not withstand the bone-chilling wind without wool and fur. The debate remains unresolved. You can only chew on the imagined barley bread while weighing the two viewpoints. Sensory images are vivid. The aftertaste of the smoked stew lingers on your tongue, the heavy feeling in the stomach. The way warmth spreads from the core to the fingertips. You curled up into a ball, leaning against your neighbor and sighing. Tonight food is like the animal skin draped over your shoulders, serving as your blanket. In the world of Vikings, survival is not merely about the clothes you wear, it's about what makes you fulfilled. As the night deepens, you will understand that every bite of stew, every bite of milk, and every bite of bone marrow is a thread on the warm fabric, just like logs and tough, woven into the longhouse. You ate smoked meat and your stomach felt very heavy. Now someone hands you a horn filled with ale. The warmth of food is one thing, but the warmth of a drink is another. The Vikings brewed beer, ale and mead. These are not merely for banquets. They gradually adapted to the rhythm of daily life. Even at night try to keep warm. A swallow's cheeks were rosy. A warm current passes through your chest. For a moment, you will feel that the cold has been completely driven away. Archaeological discoveries of residues on wine barrels, fermentation pits and clay containers confirm that alcohol has always been present in the homes of the Vikings. It is very common to brew beer with barley or oats seasoned with vanilla. The legendary mead may be rarer, but it is highly cherished. These drinks are high in calories and a bit intoxicating. Most importantly, they warm you up. For though the warm feeling is fleeting, it is enough for the family to fall asleep peacefully under the smoke-filled roof. However, even now, you can still sense a strange contradiction. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, making you feel warm on the surface, but it also accelerates the loss of heat. Modern medicine tells us that drinking alcohol in a cold hole before going to bed can be very dangerous. Did the Vikings know this? It might not be a scientific term, but they must have noticed this influence. Some people wake up drenched in sweat, while others tremble even more after drinking. Despite this, on a cold night, the immediate comfort outweighs the long-term risks. A charming narration comes from a legendary story. Aim and rank too much and fell asleep in an awkward place, sometimes on a bench and sometimes even by the stove. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and fretting a drunk uncle out of the smouldering embers before his clunk catches fire. The humorous hints retained in the story suggest that such things happen frequently and are worth retelling, but alcohol is not merely indulgence. When every bit of energy matters, the calories contained in these beverages matter. A glass of ale can fill your stomach like a small meal and help keep your heart warm. I am like honey, sweet and rich, almost like syrup, providing fuel for my body to burn quickly. You imagine lying down after drinking this glass of wine, warmth flowing over you, and dreams surfacing even faster. Experts still have differences on the scope of drinking at night. Some people believe that light beer is a daily drink for people, replacing the usually unsafe water. It is true that others have warned that brewing requires grains and honey, both of which are valuable, so families may carefully ration them. Archaeological records show that both of these extreme situations are possible. Honey wine can be seen everywhere in the banquet hall, and malt wine in the small farm is also very precious. Consume a small amount on winter nights. Sensory impressions are vivid. There is a smell of fermented barley on your tongue, the sweetness of honey lingers on your lips. A slight dizziness when you lie on your back on the fur. Around you, the sound grew louder and louder. Laughter rose and then gradually turned into snoring. Alcohol softened and blurred the noisy whole, making the physical stress and the sting of smoke more bearable. But the risk still exists. If you drink too much, you might oversleep and it will be your turn to look after the fire. Worse still, you might trip in the barn or fall dangerously near the fireplace. Folk tales even retain the warning of drinking too much alcohol before going to bed. These stories are intended to remind people that indulgence may end in disaster. So when you lie under the clunk, warmed by the stewed meat and me, you will realize that the Vikings' drink is a double-edged sword. It comforts you, keeps you going and calms you down, but it also makes you vulnerable on the coldest nights. You float into a dream, your cheeks flushed and your belly full, thinking that life sometimes tastes like barley and honey, spicy and sweet on your tongue. Your head still faintly swims over my corner, but when you turn sideways, you will notice something simple yet meaningful. The woolen cloak you wore during the day was not folded neatly. It's now pressing down on you like a blanket. In the world of the Vikings, clothes were more than just clothes. They are the armor to keep warm, whether it is day or night. When the fire gradually died out and the longhouse groaned under the snow, cloaks and outerwear became bedding. Archaeological records contain a rich variety of textiles. Fragments of wool fabric have been unearthed from tombs and swamps in Scandinavia and are usually very well preserved. Thick wool fabrics, board webbing and rough geotextiles demonstrate the dominant position of wool in daily life. Sheep are at the core of survival, not only for meat and milk, but also for wool, which can be spun into an endless array of useful fabrics. Historians agree with this. If there were no wool, the Viking knights would be even more cruel. Wool has a special magic. Its fibers can retain heat even when they get damp. In a climate where snow melts into every crevice and clothes often get wet, he is a savior. Imagine pulling your daytime cloak tighter. Its rough texture scratches, but it is also sealed in precious warmth. These cloaks are not as decorative as those popular in the late Middle Ages. They are practical fabric boards, nailed to the shoulders with brooms, heavy enough to withstand the outside wind and thick enough to serve as quilts. Here is an interesting side note. In some tombs, especially those of higher status, people found cloaks lined with imported fur. This indicates that even in clothing, there is a layering system: wool on the outside for durability and fur on the inside for insulation. Sleeping under such a cloak is like enveloping oneself in local craftsmanship and global trade. It has been proved that fashion and survival complement each other. You imagine yourself draping such a cloak over your shoulders, with wool tightly adhering to your chin and fur lining warmly touching your skin. But what about ordinary people? Did every farmer or slave have such luxury? Scholars are still debating the distribution of clothing quality. Some people think the wool cloaks are universal, although the weaving and thickness vary. Others insist that the best textiles are reserved for the rich, while the poor sleep under thinner and coarser cloth, supplemented by straw or leather. The evidence does not completely solve this problem. Let you imagine the range. From wealthy chiefs, wrapped in layered cloaks, to servants trembling under thin cotton, minus padded climbs. Apart from the cape, corsets and trousers are often worn all night long. The idea of changing into pajamas doesn't exist. On the contrary, the daytime clothes were transformed into pajamas, preserving every bit of warmth. The textiles unearthed through archaeological discoveries reveal thick woolen coats, sometimes with lac, and sometimes simple pullovers, which can also serve as pajamas, whether intentionally or not. Think about going to bed neatly dressed, taking off your boots, but everything else is intact, both for convenience and to prevent through drafts. A strange folk tale suggests that women sometimes drape shawls or headscarves over their children as an extra layer of protection. Imagine a mother loosening her woven headscarf at night and gently spreading it over her toddler, just like a makeshift blanket. These impromptu performances remind you that survival doesn't mean luxury. It's about using every available piece of fabric. Now close your eyes and feel your senses. The wool scratched your neck and weighed heavily on your chest. A faint smell of flaxseed oil still lingers. Your corset shirt itches on your arms, but its warmth is undeniable. The cloak on you blocks the cold air seeping in through the gaps in the turf wall. For a moment, your breathing will be a little easier, thanks to the stubborn heat on the wool. The social significance of the cloak also wanders in the darkness. A cape is a gift of protection, status, and even intimacy. In legends, it is sometimes described that warriors give their companions cloaks. The weight of gestures far exceeds that of fabrics. In a longhouse, the same cloak might later be used as bedding, weaving together symbols, loyalty, survival, and warmth layer by layer. You wonder if the person lying beside you ever wore their cloak in battle, and now it covers you to sleep. Historians continue to be confused about how often people wash their clothes. Some evidence suggests that wool contains almost no oil because it can repel water and dirt. This means that the cloak for keeping warm at night may have a strong smell of smoke, sweat, and linseed oil. However, for the Vikings, this was familiar, even comforting. That smell is not foul. That's home. Survival is entwined in every fiber. The pace of reuse also needs to be taken into consideration. At the daytime banquet, the same cloak can also be proudly draped over the shoulders. Then turn it into a blanket at night and share it with the children. Fabrics are never wasted. It's too expensive. Even worn minus-out rags can be rejuvenated as padding, patches or fillers for bedding. Every grain of waste helps fight the cold war at night. The image becomes clear. There were no piles of specially made blankets in the Vikings' longhouses. It is filled with multi-purpose fabric clothing that can seamlessly pass through rolls. The cloak that was fastened to the shoulder during the day would be unfastened and draped over the chest at night. A coat that gives off the smell of sweat and smoke can keep you alive when the fire goes out. The boundary between clothes and bedding became blurred until it completely vanished. So you sank deeper, the wool pressed down, and the edge of the fur brushed against your chin. What comes to your mind is not luxury but endurance. Every fiber is whispering flocks of sheep grazing in the summer fields, women spinning by the fire, and the creaking loom in the smoke-filled hall. Every thread is solid. As you drift towards your dream, you'll realize that in the Vikings' world, warmth does not come from neatly folded bed sheets. It comes from the clothes you wear day and night, tightly woven to keep warm. You blinked your eyes and woke up in the faint lowered embers, feeling a tiny body tightly clinging to your side. This is no accident. In the world of Vikings, children were often placed in the middle of the bed, not only for comfort but also as a deliberate survival strategy. The smallest body, most vulnerable to the cold, is sandwiched between adults, with layer upon layer of warmth on both sides. This is a longhouse equivalent to central heating, where children are kept alive like burning coal by the family's fire. In the tombs of the Vikings, Children were sometimes found buried beside adults sharing bedding, which echoes this practice. This is not merely symbolic, it reflects the way they sleep in life, interwoven and protected by the heat of older and stronger bodies. Archaeologists can figure out the layout here by observing the soil stains left by rotten wood and fur. The bench is wide enough to accommodate several sleeping people, with a small mark in the middle. It does not depict privacy but rather survival through closeness. Now close your eyes and imagine. Your child is curled up in front of your chest, his hair giving off the smell of smoke and wool, and his little hands are tucked under your cloak. On the other side, another child is leaning against your partner, with their legs tightly against yours. The adult insects from a protective cocoon, a living wall against the through wind. Any modern parent would be aware of the instinct to keep their child by their side. But here, this instinct is magnified by necessity. Without such human isolation, children might not have survived a night. A conclusive piece of evidence comes from subliterature, which occasionally hints at the middle position where children sleep together on the bed. Although these descriptions are rare and indirect, they reinforce the archaeological clues. The Vikings knew that cold was merciless, and they increased their chances of winning by gathering their families together. And later, there were strange musical notes in Scandinavian folk customs. In some areas, it is said that children sleep horizontally and live vertically with adults, so that many small bodies can squeeze onto a bench. Imagine that jumble of limbs, a row of adults stretching longitudinally, with children snuggling among them, just like the railings in a fence. This sounds chaotic, but it maximizes warmth and turns the wooden platform into a woven heat grid. Not all historians agree on how systematic this approach was. Some people believe that legends imply and folk customs show a long-term continuity. That is, families always use the methods of the middle child. Others warn that this could make a big difference, because some families are separated for longer periods of time, especially if the benches are wide. The evidence was incomplete and the debate lingered in the academic hold. But in the long house beneath the thatched walls where the sound was curling and smoke was swirling, this logic seemed undeniable. You can still feel it now. The closer the corpses are piled up, the less cold they will be. Now think about the emotional aspect. The children gradually fell asleep to the beating of their parents' hearts, hypnotized by the warmth of the family. The adults can rest assured when they know that their children are not only protected by their fur but also by their flesh and blood. In a world with a high child mortality rate, such night-time intimacy must have brought deep comfort. However, comfort cannot eliminate discomfort. You hid under your cloak, with a child's knee poking your ribs. Another person often turned in their sleep, hitting your nose. The bench was narrow, the space was crowded, and the silence was always interrupted by elbows and snoring. Despite this, parents accepted it because the other option was to let the child sleep on the edge and be exposed to the wind, which was unimaginable. A strange discovery was made in a cemetery. In Norway, a child was buried on a carefully folded miniature fur blanket. Is this symbolic? Does this represent the habit of this family to tuck their children in more carefully at night? We can't be sure, but it implies that bedding for young people is of special significance, both practically and spiritually. Keeping children warm is to ensure the continuation of the family. When you are in it, you feel that the picture becomes clearer. You feel the weight of the leather coat pressing on you, the warmth of the child's body dancing on you, and the steady exhalation under the quilt forming a small pocket for shared breathing. It can sometimes be suffocating, with dark sweat and a heavy smell, but it can also make one feel comfortable, like a cocoon, shielding against the cold darkness outside. From a social perspective, these arrangements have made family ties closer. A modern concept of independent nurseries or children's rooms does not exist. Sleeping is a collective effort. In this intimacy, love and dependence deepen, but so does the awareness of vulnerability. You can imagine a parent lying in bed, with their hand on their child's chest, feeling the rise and fall of the child's breathing, and silently praying to the gods, hoping that at least everyone will be alive tonight. The academic debate over whether this intimate sharing of beds influenced the Vikings' parenting style has been ongoing. Some anthropologists believe that it keeps grandparents, parents and children tightly huddled together every night, thus establishing a stronger intergenerational bond. Others, however, believe that this might intensify tensions, as lack of rest can make people lose their temper. In any case, architecture forces intimacy, and the cold further intensifies it. Now, let your mind be completely immersed in this picture. The bench was crushed by the combined weight of your family. The children moved a little. The adults adjusted themselves. The cakes rustled. Someone kindled the fire, and it hissed. The flames briefly illuminated the faces in the pile, red, sweating profusely, exhausted but still full of vitality. This is the truth about the Viking knights. They did not calmly evade suffering. This is a battle fought with warmth, body and bond, lasting from every dusk until dawn. So when you close your eyes again in this hall of imagination, you accept this discomfort because you understand its purpose. Children in the middle and adults on the edge. This is a geometric shape of survival, a night pattern written on the benches and beds. When the morning comes and the outside world is still frosty, you will wake up and know that snuggling together will make everything different. The long house became restless again, but this time the sound carried a gentler rhythm. Whispering, whispering, the rustling of the cloak grew closer and closer. You realize that an intimate relationship itself is part of getting through the cold night. Love and marriage in the Viking age were not merely social arrangements. They are warm contracts at night. Lying beside your partner not only means company, but also helps to cushion the cold air flow on your body. Archaeological discoveries do not preserve emotions, but they do reveal shared tombs where the couple were buried, with bedding, cloaks or furs covering them. These material pieces of evidence and Saga's references suggest that sleep and partnerships are intertwined. Marriage is not merely about bloodline or inheritance rights. In the depth of winter, when the fire in the stove gradually goes out, there is someone to lean on. You pulled the imagined cloaked iter and felt the warmth of the other body beside you. In a hall lacking privacy, the bone-chilling cold was not so intense. The couples whispered softly under the shared fur, leaving their intimate marks. Is it comfortable? Perhaps it's not a snoring child nearby, a goat moving in the sheepfold, or the smoke that pricks the eyes. But this is the only intimate pocket that can be found. One detail confirmed from legendary literature is the emphasis on the wedding bed as a place of negotiation and alliance. Icelandic legends sometimes mention who shares a bed with whom, not just in the literal sense, but in the sense of honor and family order. This position is very important. It stipulates who is allowed to enter warm areas, who lies beside the fire, and who is pushed to the edge with ventilation. Here is a strange little note. In some traditions, the wedding ceremony itself involves taking the bride to a wedding bench in a long house rather than a separate room. Imagine that the entire family is watching the newlyweds, sleeping spot officially determined, and everyone is fully aware that the same bench will later become their shared blanket to keep warm. Romantic privacy is not the key point of actual survival. Scholars still have differences of opinion on exactly how much privacy the Vikings could obtain. Some people believe that a crowded environment leaves little room for solitude, which indicates that close relationships are openly woven into the structure of community life. Others, however, counter that partitions or suspensions with animal skins strung on beams might offer a bit of isolation. The facts may vary. Some halls have small corners, while others expose couples completely to the gaze and listening of their relatives. Sensory images are easy to imagine. You and your partner huddled tightly together, sharing not only warmth, but also breathing. Your cloak overlaps. Your limbs are tangled together, and between snoring and coughing, you whisper words that others can't hear. Around you, life rumbles in the long house. But within this cocoon, you have created a hot bag both physically and emotionally. Even in difficult situations, there is a kind of tenderness here. Imagine a farmer pressing his coarse wool cloak over himself and his wife to ensure that she is covered before he closes his eyes. Or imagine a woman pulling her fur tighter after her husband turned on the fire, using warmth to repay his vigilance. These small acts at night are as important as any great heroic deeds, for they help this family get through the winter, which would crush them all by themselves. But intimate relationships are not limited to those between spouses. In families where widows widowers or unmarried adults live. Sharing a bed often goes beyond the boundaries of romance, and the companionship during sleep make us the boundaries of kinship and responsibility. An elderly grandmother might sleep beside her granddaughter. This is not merely for emotional reasons, but because the body temperature keeps both of them alive. A servant might curl up on the same bench like a child, filling the gaps in the warm wall. This arrangement blurs the boundaries, emphasizing that survival requires cooperation rather than etiquette. In the Christian literature of the Middle Ages, there was a special gossip that criticized people from the north. Some clergy complained that they all lay in their own cabins, with no distinction between men and women. Although it might be somewhat exaggerated, such comments imply a reality that shocks the outside world. The close relationship of the Vikings was not privatized behind the stone wall. It is audible and visible, and is part of the shared experience in the whole. For the Vikings themselves, the lack of an isolated life might have nurtured their resilience. Couples have learned to cherish quiet moments and find warmth, not in isolation but in the hustle and bustle of living together. Love must coexist with the bleating of goats and the restless movement of children nearby. Perhaps this makes it more enduring, less dependent on the environment, and more rooted in existence. Experts still question how this environment shaped the Vikings' concepts of marriage and family. Does continuous visibility enhance loyalty and transparency, or does it fuel jealousy and tension? These legendary stories offer a glimpse into both. The story of a loyal couple getting through hard times together and the story of betrayal whisper in the smoke-filled darkness. This ambiguity is appropriate, for this longhouse is both a refuge and a pressure cooker, magnifying every bond and every crack. Now imagine you are lying there, your cloaks overlapping, the weight of the fur pressing on you, smoke stinging your eyes, children coughing beside you, but your partner's hand brushing against yours. At that moment, the cold doesn't matter. In this world, intimacy is not measured by roses or candlelight, but by the warmth of sharing, soft whispers and simple acts of spending a good night together. Finally, this is the love in the Viking longhouse. It's not a grand gesture, but a night-time ritual, sharing heat, blocking each other's through drafts, and seeking connection in the crowded, smoke-filled darkness. Survival is common, yes, but in the crowd, couples still carve out their own vulnerable warm circles. The fire stopped again. You moved a little on the bench and felt the sting of the straw under your feet. At this point, you will notice another night ritual that is more important than anyone else admits, and that is refreshing the bedding itself. Straw mattresses are not permanent. They are updated, brushed, and sometimes even completely replaced. Without such efforts, the simple materials behind you will rot, flatten and be infested with pests. Keeping the straw fresh is not just for comfort. This is about hygiene, survival and a bit of family pride. Archaeological excavations have discovered thick layers of straw mixed with ashes and fragments of animal hair on the long floors of houses. These are the remnants of bedding, spread out layer by layer and updated seasonally. For straw insulated from the damp oil serves as a bit of a buffer and absorbs some of the smoke and grease from daily life. But it must change. For too long, it has turned into a dirty mattress with mold, fleas and dirt. Imagine lying on the tattered straw, giving off a sour smell, with sweat soaking through me and making it hard for me to fall asleep. A reliable expression, in medieval etymology outside Scandinavia, is shake down the bed. This means loosening the straw cushion layer, shaking it off, and then laying on new straw. Viking families might have done the same, although not with as many rituals. Imagine a woman in late autumn dragging bundles of straw and spreading them on a bench, smiling coldly and saying that these golden straws will turn brown and break in spring. Here is a strange gossip. In some northern traditions that have been preserved to the present day, during festivals, people would spread fresh straw where they slept. It is not merely practical. This is a symbol, the posture of rebirth. At Uli, lying on the new straw means welcoming the new year, praying for good luck, and also ensuring that sleep in the coming months won't be unbearably itchy. Did this custom originate from the Vikings? Scholars have been unable to prove this point, but its echo is fascinating. Now let your senses take over. He rolled around on the straw and the stiff stalks pricked your arms. The smell of hay is slightly sweet, masked by the strong musky scent of fur. Fresh straw has its own comfort. Compared with the stinky old bedding, this place is simple, plain and clean. When you move, it makes a rustling sound, which sounds almost like a whisper in the dark. Just a reminder, what you sleep on is the same as what your animals eat. However, even with such caution, that straw didn't last long. Whenever the disturbance becomes unbearable, the family may change several times throughout the year. Archaeologists have discovered layers of ashes deliberately scattered on the bed, possibly to kill pests or dry out dampness. Imagine scattering the ash on the bed before adding new straw. This is a strange kind of housekeeping that blurs the line between filth and remediation. Scholars are still debating whether straw mats are commonly used in longhouses, or whether wealthy families use alternatives, such as down or imported textiles. The funerals of a few elites included feathers and more delicate fillings, indicating some luxury items, but for most people, straw is the staple food. It is cheap, abundant and at least comfortable for a period of time. You can imagine it as a mattress for the general public. It will scratch you and make a rustling sound, but it can keep you away from the bare wooden board. The practice of making fresh straw also creates a rhythm in family life. The children's task might be to drag the bundle into the house. The servant's task is to spread the bundle out, and the old man's task is to shake the cloak and then put it down. Every part of this process is common, which once again reminds us that survival is never lonely. Keeping the bed comfortable is as important as taking care of the fire or feeding the animals. Ignore it and everyone will feel itchy, cough and complain. Imagine the sound of a new straw. Every household has moved in. The creased chorus of the lying corpse is echoed in the hall. For several weeks, it had been quiet here, gradually flattening out until only silence and dust remained. It was not until new packages arrived that the rustling sound of sleep once again filled the night. Although it may seem small, this rhythm marks time and links daily life with the seasonal cycle. Another strange level: pests are an eternal enemy. Fleas, lice and bedbugs breed and thrive on the straw bed. In fact, entomologists studying the remains of Viking tombs had discovered flea species preserved in burial fabrics, which proves that all minus night itching was widespread. You feel uneasy now, imagining the Vikings tossing and turning under the fur, not because of the cold, but because of crawling. The straw makes the bed refreshing. Yes, but this didn't solve the problem. The fight against pests is eternal. So you rolled sideways, realizing the mixture beneath your feet. The fresh straw crackled, the ashes dried up the moisture, and hidden insects waited for the darkness. This is uncomfortable and imperfect, but it is better than the other option. Lying directly on a wooden board or soil will only cause more severe cold, more severe dampness and more severe burn pain. Straw is never charming, but it is enough to reverse the balance of survival. This kind of night maintenance, with fresh straw covered with fur and the cloak shaken off, is like having a meal or praying, a ritual. In smoke-filled hall, maintaining life is a small and persistent labor. Although you may feel itchy and complain, you will also breathe a sigh of relief, because in the Vikings' longhouses, fresh straw is not a luxury. I just hope you can sleep soundly tonight. You pulled the cape higher, but you still twitched and scratched. This time it's not straw, it's an uninvited guest staying in your bed. Fleas, lice and bedbugs thrived in the warm longhouses of the Vikings, just as they did in almost every prehistoric society. If the cold doesn't affect your rest, itching is sure to happen. Living in a smoke-filled wooden hall has never been a very comfortable thing. It's about enduring the constant disturbance of those tiny creatures that live closer to your skin. Archaeologists have found direct evidence of this stimulus. When excavating Viking tombs, textile fragments often yielded flea fossils or lice eggs stuck to hair. A study from York, which was once a Viking city, unearthed combs covered with head lice and bedding layers rich in flea droppings. None of these are isolated incidents. Pests are everywhere. Everyone is scratching. Soldiers, farmers and even chiefs lay in bed at night, with fleas jumping on their furs. This longhouse is warm enough for humans to live in and also warm enough for insects to thrive. Now close your eyes and imagine that feeling. You dozed off in a daze, only to be awakened by the itching at your ankle. You grabbed, rolled and bit your shoulder. When you move around again, the straw rustles. Others do the same. Their small gestures stirred up ripples of unease on the bench. Breathing in the holes, snoring, coughing, scratching. To some extent, fleas were the true chorus of the Vikings at night. Here is a strange detail that will make you smile wryly. The double minor-sided comb was one of the most common personal items in Viking tombs. On one side, there are wider teeth for combing hair, and on the other side, there are smaller teeth for catching lice. Imagine a family gathering around a fire at night, not only telling stories but also combing each other's hair and throwing lice into the fire. The hygiene ceremony lasts twice as long as the intimate time. Perhaps even laughter can ease this frustration, when one person mocks another for holding a flea circus on their hair. But pests do not only exist in hair. They live in fur and blankets that are supposed to protect you. Animal skins offer warmth, but they also provide a perfect habitat for fleas. In winter, if bedding is not washed or replaced, pests will break out. Some studies by later scanned in Adian farmhouse anthropologists have noticed that children joke that night fleas keep them awake, suggesting that itching is regarded as part of life. Sleeping means enduring the air currents on the grass and also means enduring the slightest sting. Experts are in heated debate over the true impact of these pests on health. Some people believe that continuous stimulation can lead to skin infections or lack of sleep, making people more prone to illness. Others, however, believe that although it is annoying, the human body has merely adapted to it, and the community has also learned to coexist with it. The evidence is uncertain, but the debate shows how important these tiny creatures are in daily life. Think about this sensory world created. The smell of smoke and wool stuck to your cloak, the thickness and warmth of the fur, the sound of someone rubbing their skin with their nails across the hole. Even animals are not immune. Cows and goats bring their own insects indoors, increasing the collective buzzing. You might laugh in despair because you will realize that in this longhouse, only fleas are truly thriving. A strange archaeological record comes from the volcanic ash deposits scattered in the bedding area. Scholars speculate that the ashes were deliberately used to dry ant straw and prevent pests. Is it effective? Maybe a little. Imagine a mother sprinkling a handful of dust on the bed before laying out new straw, hoping that these grains of sand can prevent fleas from building nests. This is a primitive insecticide. However, there are also other folk remedies. Some later traditions say that placing some spicy herbs, such as peonies or junipers, on the bed is both for smelling and to repel insects. Did the Vikings do the same? There is no direct evidence, but considering their knowledge of the local plants, it is entirely possible. Imagine you are lying on a straw sprinkled with crushed juniper and falling asleep. The pungent smell was mixed with the smell of smoke and damp fur. Is it helpful, or just makes the itchy smell more pleasant? Historians remain unsure. Emotional loss should not be ignored either. When pests are around, the night will never be completely peaceful. Parents may spend a long time soothing their children, making them cry because they are itchy from being bitten. The couple curse the fleas hopping around under the blanket in a low voice. Even those strong soldiers who can face the icy sea and battlefield will surely groan because of the humiliation of scratching around like dogs all night long. Despite this, fleas and lice still became part of the identity. Cones are as indispensable as swords, and pouring fire by the stove is as common as telling stories. As Vikings, one would feel itchy and accept this discomfort, because it was a battle that took place every day with cold, smoke and pests. None can be completely eradicated, but all can be endured. So when you move under the fur again, scratch your arms and sigh, you become aware of something deeper. Viking night is an imperfect tapestry. The warmth was wrapped in smoke. The company was enveloped in the noise, and the bedding was crawling with fleas. However, people are still sleeping, still dreaming, still waking up, preparing to sail, farm and fight. Sleeping is never for comfort. This is about endurance. In perseverance, the Vikings endured the winter and also the biting fleas that indulged in the shadows. The smoke is thicker tonight. When you lie under the animal skin, you will feel a warmth outside your body. For the Vikings, sleep was not merely a physical need. It holds great weight in the spiritual and superstitious world. Fireplaces, furs, and even the straw beneath your feet have all been infused with meanings deeper than insulation. Warmth itself is sacred, a gift that can be associated with gods, ancestors, and invisible guardians. Archaeological discoveries and legendary passages suggest this invisible aspect of Vikings' lives. The small family shrine, the carved figures, and the traces of offerings near the fireplace indicate that fire is more than just fuel. It is the abode of the protector of God. Tending to the fire is to nourish the spirit of the family. Each glowing ember symbolizes life, not merely heat. Imagine someone whispering prayers while placing firewood on the fire, asking Thor to protect the whole family from the frost, or asking Freyr to look after the sleeping children. A well-substantiated being is the connection between the stove and the spirit of the land veterinarian on the land. These creatures are believed to wander around houses, guarding them or punishing those who neglect them. If a family can keep the fire burning vigorously and keep the whole in good order, it will be protected. If a family turns the stove cold, it may face misfortune. From this perspective, the survival ritual is also a kind of dedication ritual. A charming little detail was discovered in the later Scandinavian folk traditions. Sometimes people place iron nightens like nines or keys on their children's beds to ward off evil spirits. Was this done in the Viking Age? The evidence is vague, but it is easy to imagine a mother placing her child, between herself and her husband, hiding a small iron amulet under the straw, believing that the metal can repel the wandering frost or sick soul. Scholars hold different opinions on how fallible these family beliefs are. Some people think they are daily superstitions that have quietly spread within families and have never been written down. Others, however, believe that they are organized rituals that incorporate seasonal festivals like the Spring Festival, during which people wash their bedding and bless the fire. The truth might lie somewhere in the middle, a flowing mixture of actual actions and whispered prayers, unrecorded but deeply felt. The sensory world of this belief is vivid. Imagine you lie on the straw, with the crackling of the fire in your ears, listening to your grandmother murmuring spells to ward off the frost spirits. Smoke has become more than just a stimulus. It is a shield. The fur feels heavier, not only warm but also meaningful, as if the ancestors themselves were pressing tightly against the fur. The night turns into a mixture of physical endurance and mental comfort. A fascinating archaeological discovery comes from a tomb, which includes bedding. Children are buried in small fur blankets, adults in cloaks, and even complete sets of bedding. Why take bedding to the afterlife unless people believe that warmth remains important after death? It is unimaginable to sleep without fur. This interweaving of survival and spirit shows how deeply the Vikings linked warmth and happiness together, both physically and spiritually. Imagine again the role of dreams. In the smoke-filled hall, half-awakened, half-awake during segmented sleep, dreams would seem vivid yet strange. Legends often describe dreams where ancestors or deities visit at night. Is it the smoke and firelight that shape these illusions, making them look more real? Vikings who wake up from such a dream might tell the hall in the morning that a ghost is speaking, suggesting a harvest or warning of danger. In this way, even restless nights become passages to the sacred. Here is a strange hint. Some scholars believe that oppressive environments, smoke, pests, and confined spaces may enhance the spiritual dimension of the night. The discomfort blurs the boundary between wakefulness and dreams, making one feel even more as if invisible creatures are wandering within the rafters. Could it be that the Vikings did not merely regard frost as weather, but as a spirit pressing on the walls? Is every gust of cold air like a force that confronts the scorching fireplace? This is a debate involving anthropology and history. Put yourself in that mindset now. You lie in your cloak, the child pressed close to you, listening to the hissing sound of the fire. You whispered a few words, not because you fully understood, but because everyone understood. Words are shields, like cloaks, like straws, like walls. Your warmth is physical, yes, but also spiritual. You believe it can stay away from danger. There is comfort in this belief. The Knights of the Vikings were by no means merely a battle of cold and fire. This is a negotiation between human endurance and the invisible forces in the world. This longhouse not only serves as a refuge for trees and grass, but also for the spirit and songs. Warmth is a gift. In that culture, gifts always mean reciprocity. You feed the fire, and the fire feeds you. You respect those souls, and in return, they protect you from the frost. So, when you close your eyes again in this imagined hall, with thick smoke billowing around, what you feel is not just discomfort. You sense invisible deities and ancestors lingering on the rafters like shadows, breathing in the warmth of the longhouse. You realize that in Viking's winter, sleeping not only requires believing in fire and fur, but also in the invisible hand that guards the night. The longhouse fell silent again. They're not completely silent. The embers were low and the shadows were long. You noticed a quiet ritual unfolding beside the fire. Someone was squatting, stirring the coal lumps, with grape powder on their hands. They are not igniting a new flame. Not yet. They tend to favor what already exists and induce it to persist until dawn. Charcoal, ashes and embers. This was the tool used by the Vikings to make fire in the endless darkness. Without them, every morning would mean a chill starting from scratch. The remains of fireplaces discovered through archaeological excavations usually contain thick layers of ashes, which are not only the result of burning but also the result of deliberate accumulation. Before going to bed, the family scattered the ashes on scorching embers, storing the heat under the powder. In the morning, the person sleeping closest to the fireplace can push the ashes aside to give off a faint red glow and then add new wood to it. This method saves precious fuel and avoids the pain of using flint and lighting fires